are listening to Para X.
Darksome night and shining moon, east and south and west and north, hearken to the witch's rune. Here we come to call ye forth. Earth and water, air and fire, wand and pentacle and sword, work ye unto our desire. Hearken ye unto our word. Cords and censers, scourge and knife, power of the witch's blade, waken all ye unto life. Come ye as the charm is made, lady of the sacred well, honored hunter of the night, lend your power unto this spell, work our will by magic right. South and west and north, hearken to the witch's rune. Here we come to call ye forth, earth and water, air and fire, want and plenty, cool and sword. Work ye unto our desire, hearken ye unto our word.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, Merry Meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the ParaX Radio Network. Now, tonight's opening song was by Spiral Dance, and it was called The Witch's Rune, which is right in tune with tonight's topic, because we're going to be talking about the book called The Theban Oracle with author Greg Jenkins. Now, Greg is an avid researcher of the unknown. He's a folklorist and collector of urban legends, and he's an acquirer of many artifacts pertaining to the occult and the preternatural. He's written several books on ghostly legends, haunted folklore, and more, and tonight we're going to be talking about his book, The Theban Oracle. Now, like runes, in a sense, the Theban Oracle is a unique and singular writing system that's based on the ancient magical writings devised by the 14th century magus, Honorius of Thebes, and was also utilized in other medieval and Renaissance contemporaries of high magic. Now, in his book, it offers both the complete history of the medieval magic system, and it's a working manual for the modern mage to utilize it. So we've got a lot to cover tonight, and please join me in welcoming Greg Jenkins. Hey, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I just, I spoke and then I had to stop for a breath. There's a lot to say. There's a lot going on here tonight, and I'm so glad you're here, because I think probably a good place to start is at the beginning. And some people may not know what the Theban alphabet is and why historically was there any need for a cryptic alphabet, period, or any kind of a coding system like Theban to begin with. That might be a good place to start.
Probably going back to ancient Greece, really, with grammatomachy systems, which would use various letters in a coordination with gods or goddesses and plants and animals and minerals and so forth. I guess you could call them one of the fledgling groups of people that use that. However, you can see it in Babylonia, ancient Persia. You can see it with the early Chaldea people, the early Jews. They used these systems as a basic form of divination and oracle-type systems. My system is very much put in a game-like format that we're familiar with today, and you can base it with the tarot or with the rune stones as they are today. But the history of the Theban script, for instance, is so mysterious, and nobody really knows. It's just one conundrum wrapped into another mystery. And I can give you a brief history on that, if you like.
Yeah, it is, because, also one of the things that intrigues me about it is it's sometimes called the witch's alphabet, so that, all the more reason to give some more information. Yeah.
Well, let's just start from recent times and go back a little bit. I guess from the 50s on to today, it was used by modern-day pagans, Wiccans, as a way to code their books of shadows. And that was done not only in homage to the ancients, because they had to do the same thing, especially during the burning times, especially during the period when the Swan Book of Honorius or the Liber Juratus was written. It was necessary to do that to befuddle anybody looking into your private writings. And you can either deny it or you can go to the stake, as it was, or the pit, knowing that you kept your works sacred. Mm-hmm. But in the 50s and 60s and 70s on to the present time, it's done more as a way of homage and as a connection to the ancient. During the early 40s and 50s, when Gerald Gardner really became hot into this, he explored all these aspects to it. And before Gerald Gardner, it was Francis Barrett in 1801, who really, if you want to think about the English Kabbalists and magi, brought a resurgence in magic thinking and the ancient ways to a very staunch and Victorian-minded people, which, as you can imagine, was quite a feat. But people really grasped it. They embraced it, even as the dawn of the Industrial Age, when ghosts and demons and haunted houses were pretty much fading out of the main picture in lieu of technology and what have you, as it were. There were still those who wanted to hold on to the old and respected the ancient. And that's what happened here. Now, Barrett got his work from Cornelius Agrippa, of course, in his book, The 3 Books of Occult Philosophy, which was done in the 1530s. And everybody, I'm sure your listeners know who Cornelius Agrippa was.
Mm-hmm.
Great, powerful magi. But he just spoke lightly on the subject. He originally heard it from the writings, or read it from the writings of Peter Diabano, or Petrus Diabanus. And he was an Italian writer several hundred years earlier. It was a man known as Honorius of Thebes. Now, this is where the mystery comes in. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows who this man was, or if it was a group of people, a private organization, but the legend holds that either in the late 13th century or early 14th century, a large group of magi from around Europe and Middle East, from Egypt and Greece and Toledo, Spain, and so forth, got together to hide their works. They wanted to, and this is a legend, they wanted to condense a large section of each organization's, each group of people's, or magi order stuff into 3 books. And that's what they did, allegedly. But there's only fragments of it today, and you can see it in England. You can see it in one of their many Sloanes at the British Library, and you can get it online, too. And there's a few really good sources that you can see the fragments of it in early Latin. But the legend says that they took these ancient spells and ancient rituals and so forth and condensed it into 3 books, which were then to be given to a master of each order, and then would be passed down. Now, a lot of these were lost throughout history, and they were in fragments. And as the church was going crazy at the time, killing people for nothing, if you were caught with something like this, it was instant death. And as you well know, the burning times killed about 80,000 people or more from start to finish, probably a lot more than that, actually, just for doing nothing. So you can imagine having a book of magic spells was kind of like having top-secret codes from the NSA or something today. You're going to hunt it down, and that's what happened. But the Theban alphabet is the method, allegedly again, that they used to code all these words. Now, you can see basic Latin in the fragments today, and almost no rendition of the Theban Oracle until the 1600s in Agrippa's works. So we don't know if Agrippa had original copies. It is suspected that Dr. John Dee did, the mage for Queen Elizabeth I. But supposedly he had it in his library, and he used it as a format, along with others, to create his Danubian magical traditions. So it plays a center focus. It is basically for people of this path, the Grand Grimoire, if you will. It's a very important book. Even though we don't have all of it, we don't understand all of it, there's more myth than fact to it. And that's what got me interested. That's what got me rolling on this.
Yeah, well, a long time ago, I found a Theban font for the computer, and I got all excited about it, and then I thought, nobody's going to be able to read it. But you just kind of like, ooh, let's, because it really, I don't think there are many Theban scholars out there who, would read it as, we would read normal English. Right. But it's still kind of fun to have, like that part of it. But, I really like that lots of historical figures like Agrippa, like Dr. John Dee, and all the way through Gerald Gardner, who I guess most people do know he was the founder of Wicca, were working with it as well. Now, that kind of would make you think that all these alphabets, like Theban, Enochian, all the other ones out there, because Theban obviously is not the only one, it would make you kind of lead you to believe that all of these were associated with magical workings. Is that a fair statement?
I would say so. I mean, you got the letters of the daggers. You have the passing of the river. You have the lettering of the magi. All of these. I mean, there's several of them, and most of these really don't form a language. Unlike, say, for instance, the Scandinavian or Norwegian rune system, mm-hmm. that you can actually form sentences and meanings and so forth. It became more complex. Mm-hmm. Theban is one of those that was used basically just for coding purposes, codex, or as representations of things and places and events and people, which is how I applied it to the Theban Oracle. That's why I have various sacred herbs. I have casts of angels. Keep in mind that even though the popes were massacring thousands of people for doing this, they were doing it themselves. And I mean, geez, Pope Leo, Pope Honors, no connection. First and third, we're all using eye writing and talismanic magic and so forth. They were using magic symbols, and they were using this process right here in divination, which, it goes back to their belief in the Old Testament, Leviticus. It tells you can't do any of this. It's a mortal sin. Well, if you read Leviticus, breathing turn to the left is a sin, and you're doomed. So you got to take everything with a large grain of salt. And they were going by exact disciplines of this of their books, of their understandings of it. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. That was a major order. That's what condemned millions of thousands of people to die. So
yeah,
you got to keep that in that mind. But the lettering is representational to the person using it. I mean, I did it my own way. I applied it the way I did my readings from alchemical texts and so forth. And anywhere from Nicholas Culpeper to Agrippa's works and so forth. I might apply it as such, but that doesn't mean the individual practitioner cannot do the same thing for themselves. They can apply it. That's where something Sir James Frazer talked about in sympathetic magic. You focus your direction. You use your focusing tool, which is your mind. If you need to use and implement a target like an FMA or a wand or something like that, those are focusing tools. And only the power comes from the practitioner. Exactly. And we all have it. It's just some embrace it and some deny it, right?
Mm-hmm. It happens. Now, the Theban Oracle is a form of divination, probably, again, most similar in nature to runes, in that letters of a specific alphabet are written on stones and then drawn from a bag in different combinations, like a one-stone reading, or a three-stone reading or something. So I want to interject, though, that because Tim and I are doing a book together on divination, which should be out sometime later this year, I was really surprised to learn that the practice of divination goes way back, farther than most people imagine.
Oh, sure.
Many think that it's hundreds of years, and that's a really long time. But in actual fact, I found out through a little bit of research that the earliest confirmed evidence of divination was found on a turtle shell that was excavated in China and dates back to between 7,000 and 5,700 BC. And that was before the Greeks were doing their thing.
That's right.
And this particular shell had archaic symbols on it. So, I mean, divination is so broad, such broad spectrum of ways and means and hows and whats. And some similarities are, closer to others. But it's just kind of fascinating that we can do this and we can make it happen. And as you said, we can make it our own, which is
exactly
the best part of it. And now I know each stone has its own specific meaning, but I don't know if I'm going to ask this and it's going to sound right or stupid, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. What do the symbols that comprise the alphabet as a whole represent? Now, I know you kind of touched on a little bit before. Are they letters? Are they symbols of things? And then, also I kind of noticed that lots of them look like the letter M, and that's only because that's the first letter of my name. So let's talk about the meaning of each letter. I mean, you have it written out as an alphabet, and you can use it as such. But does each thing go a little bit deeper than that?
Well, sure. Now, as I said before, a lot of this comes from eye writing and some from alchemical systems. So the lettering is meant to be a one-stroke system, meaning simply each letter in this system in eye writing is done in curvatures and in round circles with loops and so forth. It makes it very pretty. It's probably why it became known as an angelic script. Even though you have some straight lines in it and what have you, you're going to see a direct correlation between some of the ancient alchemical systems of this and other forms of eye writing throughout history. The difference is, I think, is that there is a very unique script to each one. The curves owns something to the universe. The ancients might have looked at the U as a female, as very feminine, which would, the entrance, that which holds, that which bears. You'll see some phallic symbols in here too, some with twists and with direct jutting knives, I guess you would call them, pointing out. Very similar to the dagger speech, another magi form of writing. So you'll see some of that in here too. And a lot of them will look the same, and that probably could have been, I should say, done to make it difficult for those trying to interpret it. Now, today it would be very easy to interpret a cryptologist to figure out what these words mean. Not just because they have it, but if it was created today, they would learn a pattern in the letter, and they would be able to figure it out. Now, in ancient times, that would have been more difficult. That's not to say they wouldn't have been able to do it. A lot of your scholars would have looked at it, and they would eventually have figured it out and made a Rosetta Stone type pattern out of it. But this writing is meant to be a flowing system with one stroke. You can make a slash in it, but basically your pen doesn't have to leave the paper unless you're connecting each one to it like in script, which was done. You just don't usually see that. So you can imagine how hard that was.
Wow. Yeah.
Unlike, today when we write our English alphabet in script and so forth in cursive, it would have been difficult to do it with this, but it was done on occasion. Yeah.
That's crazy because in our alphabet, most of the letters don't look alike, and you put them next to each other. Like in Theban, I wrote something the other day, and I think the P and the R look exactly alike from a distance, but then there's one little telltale doohickey. As you were saying that, they look alike, but there's always one little thing. And when I looked at that, I thought those two letters were the same. I thought I'd miswritten something. And
the O, P, and R do have a similarity because they have the M looks. But one, the P, which I represent for Paracelsus, it just worked together. But it has an ending dash which goes inward to the left, as in O and R has the bottom line, the script part of it goes in a curve. One curves up and one curves down. Now that might fool the Witchfinder General, and it might be one little word can change everything and make it garbled, and they'll say, well, that doesn't mean some god or anything like that. It means rock. It comes out meaning rock. So maybe they're just collecting rock. You don't know. They were so bent in their fervidness, and their religiosity and so forth, that they would have seen the devil anywhere. The devil is detailed, so it probably would have made a difference, but it would have thrown them off the path a little bit.
Well, yeah, and I mean, fervent, any group of people that would jail someone as a suspected witch, and then see, and we have to think back to the times, and it wasn't exactly the cleanest of times and stuff.
No.
And so they would throw them in this wood cell, or a mud floor cell or whatever. And if a bug happened into the cell, which I can't see how that couldn't happen, that was enough to condemn that poor person as being a witch, because they would consider the bug to be their familiar.
Yeah.
So,
and keep in mind also, Marla, that these people, there was an ulterior motive. It wasn't all for the fight for Christ or God.
No.
There was no Christianity in their fight at all, zero. But they condemned for money and for profit and for land. If you were a midwife, which was a popular thing for many women to do, they would accept a chicken or a pig or maybe a cauldron of stew or something like that as price. But the doctor wanted gold. They wanted silver. They wanted cash. So you got this uppity woman coming in there and delivering babies, which I should be doing, the great doctor. Mm-hmm. So I can't have this. So they got together and they took care of that problem. And it was just one sham after another. I mean, you talk about evil politicians. Yikes. This is nothing compared to what they did. The witch trials in Salem. I mean, look at that.
Well, yeah.
It was all over land. Reverend Parris, right? He wanted that land. So what did he do? You're a witch. No, you die. It's that simple.
It is, and we're giggling now a little bit, but it's very sad. I'm only half giggling because times haven't changed that much. We're still corrupt and we're still doing all that stuff. So that was the giggle, not that they were putting witches to death that weren't witches. Just anybody happened to be, but that's times don't change. What's the thing about everything old is new again, right?
Basically, yeah. It doesn't change. I mean, the old biblical saying, nothing new under the sun, that's true. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything we experience today has already taken place a millennium ago, 2 millenniums ago. Mm-hmm. It's just, humans are pretty much the same. You got your technology changes and so forth, but what runs the machine is the human, and that remains steadfast.
Exactly.
Which is not always good.
All right, well, let's throw back to the stones for a minute, because we could go on this for a whole nother hour.
Okay.
So there are 24 stones, if I counted correctly, and each has its own name, like Daleth, Mem, Zed, and each is attributed to historical figures, like Daleth is the Nostradamus stone, Mem is the Nicholas Flamel stone, and Zed is the Merlin stone, just to name a few. So how did you put stone to person?
Well, a lot of it is my own choice, obviously, and I wanted to choose a luminary and the path that it would represent to match them the best. So, like Jeanne d'Arc, she signifies basically the journey ahead. I mean, there's something in store for you. There's a change, a new development. The sacred herb was lavender. It was French lavender. And the angelic order was thrones, and the Hebrew representative was the alpha for their lettering. So I wanted to keep everything in sync. Now, for Joan of Arc and so forth, we knew that she made a great sacrifice, and that she was used for the benefit of warfare. And as an icon, she was like a spokesperson to incite others to go battle the English. That's what that was all about. Now, was she a witch? Was she intuitive? Was she in tune and hearing the voice of God, or what have you? We don't know. Let's assume so. But when that time was up, when she served her purpose, she had to make a great sacrifice. So that sacrifice actually turns into a development. Her sacrifice made her a martyr. The same church that condemned her and killed her now uses her as an icon, which is interesting if you think about it. But there you go. For let's say John Dee, for instance, brilliant man. One of my models, I should say. Dee was as brilliant as you can want. The problem was that he was so brilliant that he, like Albert Einstein, who walked out of his apartment with a suit and tie and shirt and his underwear and shoes. He was brilliant, but he was absent-minded. He'd forget the little things which we would just take for granted. Dee was very much the same way. You can imagine a man who, he was probably a spy. A lot of people say that. So he lived a double life, and some people assume that when he went with Edward Kelly on the travels and so forth to do aspects of their magic and practice, that he was actually working for Queen Elizabeth. And that's probably accurate, I would think. Interesting enough, his call letters or numbers was 007, so he was about James Bond. Isn't that cool? But he represents concentration, obviously, thought, and wise decisions. The negative side to that is not making wise decisions, not thinking out things, and not really concentrating on what needs to be concentrated on. That is the flip side of the coin that all of us have, unfortunately. So when I chose John Dee for those aspects of magic, if you will, it's meant to show us what we need to think about at this time. It's not a direct path of magic. It's not like you're going to conjure up some kind of magical aspect from an inanimate object. It's not if you're using a stone, a shard of wood, a shell, or bone. That's not holding the magic. Again, this is going to pertain to you because you chose that art item. Mm-hmm. You chose it out of a bag or in the cover of darkness, what have you. Something about you, I don't believe in coincidences, so something about that stone or item you chose, that is the magical aspect. Now, what we don't understand is usually called magic. So, I mean, you can imagine if we took a cell phone back 300 years after you got killed, you'd be considered a magician. Because it is so beyond us to understand it. So let's just say that the human vibrations that make you pick this stone or what have you is just simply magic. Just call it magic, because we don't have an understanding of what it truly is. We know it exists. People listening to this show are going to know that it exists. But we don't know exactly what it is. We can't put anything empirically on paper and stating, well, it weighs this much, it looks this much, and we can't do that. That's what makes it magic. So if you choose the John Dee stone and you apply it to a single draw, for instance, there are several draws. You have the single, the 3, and the 6, 9, and you can do a hand cast, which is the oldest form of divination scattering. It goes back to the Vikings and the Chinese, as you mentioned earlier. But if you choose one, just this one stone, and it's John Dee, and your question, because you're supposed to think about your question before you draw it and while you're picking around in the bag for the item. You're supposed to think, what is my situation? Now, I'm having problems at work. I don't know. I'm not really getting along with my workmates, the guy in the next cubicle or whatever. It could be anything. It could be about, I really want to date this girl, and I don't know, is she going to go out with me? Ask a sincere question, but do it in your mind. You don't have to voice it out, and you don't voice it to others if you're with a group of people, but you think about that for a few moments. And the item, I found this to work for me, the item that feels warmer to the touch is the one you want to draw. Now, I can't say that for everybody. That's me.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But each person is going to have their own feeling of this one. It could be the shape, it could be the texture, whatever it is. This is why I always choose things of the earth. I don't like paper as much as some people do. I prefer things of the earth. Stones is great. That's right from Gaia. And you pull that strongest, draw the stone out, say it's John Dee. So now you know it's telling concentration. Well, it's subjective. The great psychologist Carl Jung would really embrace this kind of system because it makes you look towards another thinking pattern, another aspect of your persona, who you are. It's not analytical at all. It's very subjective. But it's a subjective system which will work for you because you can feel it. It's something you feel. It has nothing to do with analyzation.
Right.
So you think about that. Think about what those words are: concentration, thought, wise decisions, and then you read the passage. And do you have the book?
Yeah.
They sent you one. If you read the passage, do you have it in front of you? Mm-hmm. You want to read it?
Yeah. Where am I going? John Dee. Okay. What number is he? Hang on. Out of 24. While I'm looking up John Dee, you might want to also explain the mystery stone.
The mystery?
The mystery stone, yeah.
What mystery?
The mystery stone.
Oh, the mystery stone. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. Okay, the mystery stone. I'm going to call that for Bethany. Do you know who Bethany is?
Sorta, kinda. Probably with help. Yeah.
She doesn't. She exists, but nobody knows who she was, and that's a story in itself. And I'll tell you, when I was working on my bachelor's at Norwich University in Vermont, I was renting a cabin while I was up there in school from one of my professors, and he and his wife would let me use their car, and I would go over to Bar Harbor every once in a while. Well, I was in the general area of Arcadia. I don't know if you know the East Coast, but it's way up there in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And they had an estate sale, and during my investigation of the antiques and stuff that they had, I saw a big blanket trunk from Civil War period, I would say, and in it there was an old saber, and there was something wrapped up in cloth with a bunch of little knickknacks and so forth. And when I opened up this thing wrapped in cloth, it was a leather-bound book. And it was in pretty good condition. It was kind of oily, and it probably could have been done that way to preserve it. But it turned out being a book, to make a long story short, it turned out being a book of shadows, and the only name I could find on it was Bethany, the lady's name. It was very fancy script, very faded. A lot of the pages inside were worn and eaten through bugs and through time and so forth, but a lot of it was spared. And I think if you go to my Facebook page, you can see that. You can see a picture of it. But this book had a couple of the icons in it, some of the letters of Theban, and it did give brief mention to Barrett's work, which obviously this woman or person had at the time. So this was around 1816. That was the earliest date I saw in the book, and the latest date was 1820. So I took it to my professors and had them look at it. At that time, I had no idea what Theban was, what the letters were. Completely new to me, and they did a little search and got back to me, and they explained what it was. So Bethany is the mystery. She is a mystery. She is a woman that I assume that lived in this area that was practicing the wicked craft or some form of path in secret. But she didn't have a choice about it, because in those days, even though it was accepted in some circles, if you went to various Bible belts, which that area was, you wouldn't have been killed, but you would have been ostracized. And I think she kept that very secret. So I applied this unknowable stone that doesn't have any kind of lettering on it. It's a blank stone. So there is no positive or negative aspect to it. The divinatory meaning has its own. It just means there's an unknowable path ahead, something of unknown origin. It stands for the mystery. Sometimes you can look at this as, go ahead and choose another stone. Or think of that. Think of the meaning of that for the day. Does it have meaning? Does it mean that you shouldn't even concentrate on your question right now? Let it go for the day? Mm-hmm. Or if it's a part of a 3 or 6 or 9 pull draw, what aspect does that cover? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Okay, so I've got John D. in front of me. What am I reading now?
Look for the divinatory meanings, what that means to you. Okay.
So it represents the very essence of contemplation, good thought, and wise decision-making. Though we may make studious choices in our affairs and be thought of as wise by our contemporaries, we may nonetheless wear the self-made blinders of ignorance that hinder our path in life. Very good point. While Dr. John D. was certainly wise and honest in his thinking processes, he lacked 2 vital elements to his genius: common foresight and mindful consideration. So this Theban stone indicates that there may be mental blocks in your path, those invisible obstacles and potholes that make us stumble and occasionally fall. Yet with good mental fortitude and proper decision-making, you can be victorious in your endeavors. Now is the time for divine patience, and even more educated and experienced women or man may occasionally be taken for the fool. Beware the spiritual footing you are treading on. Be always alert for those outside your personal interest and well-being, Instead of becoming too analytical or even paranoid by this assertion, however, try sitting back and observe the smallest aspects of those around you. Do you see sincerity or fraudulence? And then there's a little more to it, but yeah, it makes a great deal of sense.
Right.
But as I'm reading this, go ahead.
No, well, it's not meant to be, really mysterious or cryptic or enigmatic. It's basically common sense to all situations. A lot of us do that. That's what John Dee was. That's where he made his mistakes. Is that as though he could do any kind of math and he could write these ancient systems and so forth. He had all these great skills, but those little tiny things he overlooked because it was too simplistic, and that is a mistake we all make. Now, if you pull that stone in reverse, it's going to seem more negative. So basically, if that stone is drawn away, it basically warns that there is a presence outside the protective barrier which binds your natural persona. There's something drawing you off where you need to be. You're not thinking positively. You're not thinking in a positive manner in your situation. Basically, it tells you that you must act rationally and not emotionally. This stone, when reversed, warns that someone is looking for an opening within your presence. Now, this I put it as an example. Maybe somebody is looking to screw you up, to fuddle you up at work. In lieu of the question that as I said earlier, maybe you have a problem at work, maybe there's something wrong with a business partner, what have you. It's telling you that there may be somebody there who's doesn't have your interest in their interest, your best interest. And then I use Edward Kelly as an example. Okay, now Edward Kelly was definitely a famous partner that he had in his magical workings, and they traveled a lot together. But Kelly, as most occultists know, was kind of fraudulent. He was kind of a flim-flam man and used his knowledge basically to get money and so forth. He was a con man. He swindled people. He got his ear cut off for it. He had a reputation. So even though they're friends, right? They're buddies within reason, or colleagues, he still was kind of a bad influence. Now, if Dee would have thought wisely about this and not just focusing on his magical endeavors, which he was full time, he would have seen this. This is telling you, be cautious. Stop a minute, put down your pen and paper, and calculator, whatever it is, and look around. Look at your situation with a rationality, with your clear thinking, and just take your time on it. That's all this is. You know what I'm saying? It's not telling you you're going to win the lottery or you've got somebody coming after you. It's just common sense. And that's what's lacking today in all kinds of dealings, not just magic, but I would say especially within the realms of magic. There's always room to take time and think about it. That's when you get your best answers.
And, I think it's important because we need to make our own Theban oracles. I mean, we really do. I mean, there are some for sale. I agree that, look it up and you can find some. But I think it's important for us to make our own spells and implements, including this, because, if it's all possible, because things made by our own hands and filled with our own energy are going to work better than the pre-made version.
Exactly.
And with you talking about the Theban stones, they could be pebbles, they could, like you said, they can be bone, they can be wood, they can be clay. We not only get to make them, but we get to choose the media which they are, which resonates even more to us. So I think it's really important. I know you were talking when you and I were talking about this, that at one point Weiser was considering making up stones to go along with this book. And while I'm guessing that they didn't do it because of financial things, I really think it was better that they didn't.
I think you're right. I see where you're going there.
Yeah. I think we just, we need to put our stuff, yes, we can take something we buy and we can consecrate it and we can cleanse it and we can, leave it out, whatever. we can, but something made by our own hand is even stronger. So, I think that's the blessing, because in your book, I mean, you not only tell everybody how to make them, every stone has an explanation. I mean, there's no way you can pick up this book and cast the stone and not understand what it says. I mean, it's like you said, it's common sense. It's written very clearly. So it's kind of like a ready-made divination system, but it's also personalized for each of us.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important to mention, and I really can't wait to make up my stones, because it's like, yeah, well, I got to find just the right medium. But the book is so helpful, I guess is what I'm saying, and it's something that anybody can pick up and anybody can use. Some people think, well, do you have to be a witch to do this, or do you have to be a psychic? Or, no, anybody can do this if you can read. And you can copy letters. That's pretty much all it takes. Yeah. And people that are into the tarot, I mean, I guess to me there were some similarities, like pulling one stone or a three. It's similar to the spreads, a 1-card spread, a 3-card spread, kind of. But also with tarot, there are reversals, and this kind of surprised me that the stones had reversal meanings as well. So anybody that knows the least bit about divination, and it's not something that you have to memorize. It's in the book. You open the book and you find it, and certain things you will remember more than others, but it's all there. And also, I think I need to mention that Theban is not strictly divinatory in nature, but it can also be used in magical working, such as spell casting and candle magic. And you've got a chapter in the book called Using the Theban Stones for Goodly Spellcasting. Let's talk about that a little bit, because you've even included a couple of spells, a few.
Oh, sure. Well, again, I think magic is a very personal thing. And I make this loosely on methods that I've used myself, and some of these are extremely time-honored. But say candle magic, for instance, each candle has a color. Now, you can apply that color. This is where you can come in and make your own process. You can add a color and its meaning with a Theban letter stone, and you can apply it to that. So say you have one for courage and a new journey ahead or something like that, and you want to apply it to strength. So you might use a red candle. And, something for strength and power and domination of personal plans and goals and so forth. So you use that in your candle, and you carve that symbol on the candle itself. You can consecrate it, if you like, with the oil that's associative to that subject for courage or the new journey ahead. So if it's clove oil, for instance, you can take clove oil, essential oil, and rub it on the candle, which will make a nice scent and also give it a sense of power. Or cinnamon oil, for instance. Yeah. Now, when you concentrate in your normal candle magic ritual, which is pretty much universal, but again, you can apply this yourself. You are creating that path. You are creating that power yourself. And this comes from sympathetic magic. And I'm sure most of your listeners know what sympathetic magic was. It's applied to Sir James Frazer, the great anthropologist from England, in the late 1800s, and in his book, The Golden Bough. Now, this is a book that every one of us should read, just for the sake of not only educating ourselves, but in showing us how many cultures use magical systems in their daily lives, in their cultural endeavors, and what have you. And if you'll find that we're doing the same exact thing, even though we know nothing prior about this culture prior to reading the book. So that's called sympathetic magic. Basically, it's contagious. It's like attracts like. It's what you believe can actually make change. Now, having worked in medicine and the psychiatric hospitals mostly for a good portion of my adult life, as a counselor and therapist, I can tell you that these things are real. And your mind and my mind and anybody's mind can create the most beautiful harmony in one's life or the most tragic consequences. I knew a doctor, for instance, real quickly, who really believed that his patients and he worked in Louisiana, so he had a lot of clients, a lot of patients that were very much steeped in root magic and hoodoo and so forth. So if they had a problem, say they believed they were cursed, he would use a counter curse to break it. And he would work through this spell. He would actually conduct a ritual. And this is a medical doctor, okay? This is a guy that went to Johns Hopkins. He was a brilliant guy. He still is. And he would apply this with his patients, and they would accept it. If it means, like, okay, take this penny and rub it 3 times on a gravestone of this powerful magi and magic at this cemetery. Rub it 3 times on the top and bury it under the front stoop of your door. Okay, that's an example. He would wear the blue tinted glasses and everything, the traditional markings of a root doctor. He would apply the ritual with the patient. And the patient would apply it with the direction of the doctor, and his thought transferred to her thought or his thought. It would thus be put into flow. It's a universal transit, if you will. It creates it. The power of the mind and the soul, the spirit, the mana of the human, whatever you want to call it, gets activated. If you believe it enough, you will make it pass. It's like the power of prayer. I guarantee you, I will swear in a dozen books of high magic and Bibles and what have you, and tell you that this is real, because I know it is. I've experienced it. So, who's doing it? Who's creating the magic?
We are.
We are. We are the conduits. We are that conduit that transfers great power into a guided laser beam, and we have the power to do that. And that's what my magic is: the goodly spellcasting. Use this as an example of focusing. It's a focusing technique to what you're trying to apply, whether it's finding love. Keep in mind that you should never address or focus on a particular person. That's bad. Never do that. Even if you really love this girl or you really love this guy, you never focus on that, because you are doing a causality change that could be detrimental to yourself and to that person. So, if, for instance, if I'm going to do that, I would use a pink candle. I might use rose petals. I might use rose oil and anoint this candle. And something that I might apply love to the feminine spirit. So I would say I'm going to use the Theban letter for Hypatia of Alexandria, and I'm going to carve it in the candle. I'm going to anoint it. I'm going to surround it with rose petals. I'm going to focus on pure, good love. Nothing disgusting, no lust. It has to be from the heart, from the real vibration of love. Men can have this too, not just the ladies. You can actually focus on something that's meaningful and true. You keep doing it. You can follow accepted charts of your path. If you're going to do it on certain moons, you're going to do it on certain days. You can get very complex, or you can be very simple. It could be any time. Because in truth, the magic that you hold to the universe knows no time, no space, no lunar calendars. This is what the ancients did because it was advisable to them. It's something that they saw as a great mystery. But now I think a lot of us realize that this ether, this ethereal realm, where, if you want to call it magic, exists, is universal. It is nonstop. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be changed. It can change, but you can't change it. You can only tap into it. And it's forever. So you can use this anytime. The point is that you're focusing on your goal, and you're focusing on this true, for instance, love, relationship, and so forth. It happens. It will happen if you believe in it. It may not be tomorrow. It might be next week. It could be next month. But the more you focus on it, the more you're going to, as they say, put it out to the universe and draw it in.
Exactly. I mean, this, since we're running out of time, I just have to say, everything that you need, I mean, to be very 21st century, this is your one-stop shop book kind of thing. It's how to make the thing, how to do the thing, how to, apply magic to it if you want to. And also, we can all make changes in our lives just by using the alphabet itself. I mean, it's just crazy. There's so many things that we can get out of this. And the book is completely complete. I mean, it's a comprehensive guide. So while I bring that up, where can people find out where they can get the book and more about you?
Well, you can find the book, of course, on Weiser's Red Wheel Weiser's website. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can order it if they don't have it, but it's readily available. And you can go online and just search it, and you can find it. More information about me. I don't know. I don't have too much. I'm kind of secretive. But
Facebook page, then. Facebook, how's that? People can go to your Facebook page, yeah. They can do that. Yeah, that's good. And I understand you've got some more books coming out soon, or working on them now.
I do. Yeah, I'm starting one now. I have two that are really serious books. One is on sex offenders and that psychology, because I've worked with that population for many years, and I'm going to do that one. It's a very controversial book. And then I'm doing one on parapsychology, which is a more scholarly look into the arts of the survival hypothesis. And that's underway. I've got that pretty much. And I want to do another book in the realm of plant alchemy and so forth, and dealing with plants as a magical tonic. So I've got things on the burner. Yeah, my ghost work, I guess, is over. I did a few books on Florida's ghostly legends and folklore. I did that. So like you, I did my series in the area that I was living at the time. I'm in Chicago now, but yeah. So I have a great love in all the same things you do. So we're kindred spirits. We all belong to the same kind of group.
Yes,
same kind of family.
It's a good family to be part of. Definitely a good family. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening. Stay on the line if you can for a couple of seconds after we go off. And as I said, I can't wait to make myself a set of stones and work with the Oracle. And I also want to thank everybody for listening in tonight, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Martha Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2013. Moonlight Haw by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.